Welcome. I actually moderate the SDG-free session. If you go to the next slide, what we will do today here is to have a brief introduction, 10 minutes approximately, probably a bit less. Then enter the panel where we have four different speakers that I will introduce in a second. As well as at the end, we wanted to have kind of a first step touch as well. And we asked at Capgemini, our innovation lab, to create a home care app to deal with a specific healthcare issue. You will see everything else about that. I'm looking forward what they have prepared for us. If we enter, what is our panel for today? I will have the pleasure to welcome Scott Heald, who is the Director of Data-Driven Innovation at Public Health Scotland. And mostly I will be very thrilled to give him the virtual stage in regards to how data sharing and how data has enabled to tackle the crisis of the pandemic in Scotland and UK. I also have the pleasure to welcome Cyril François, who is COO of Future for Care, actually a data ecosystem in the healthcare field. And we will have a lot of insights about how this functions and what it enables also for startups to leverage. And speaking of which, I also welcome Fabien from Medvir, who is a startup actually linked or almost linked to the Future for Care. So here actually we will see the other side of the ecosystem. And last but not least, we will also have Henry Hoffmann from Ada Health, a startup based in Germany, working on symptom assessment with data and technology. And you can see it actually, it's very an ecosystem as such, the panel. What we want also to hear from is, again, you, the audience, and to understand what your opinion is about the topic. So I suggest we take a first survey in the introduction and another one in the conclusion. Here is the first question we have for you. Simply, what are fields of SDG 3 where you think better data sharing can help achieve the SDG? Here as well, the functionality is easy. Simply scan the QR code as well, or go to menti.com and enter the number that you see here. I will do it as well and answer to the question basically. And Delphine, as soon as you can also move to the Menti page where we will see the results in live. Okay, I see there were already a few quick answers. Okay, do not hesitate to answer, right? As stated very well in the introduction, we are at the beginning of this journey, and I'm sure that we are not all experts in citizen information about care or data-driven decision-making processes by governments in the pandemic. So do feel free simply to answer the question as you feel the potential is, which actually shows us here that you rank the potential to be quite average in regards to other streams that we have surveyed before about the same questions. Let's just wait for one additional minute. All right, thanks. Let's move back to the slides. So when we assess today the topic of collaborative data ecosystems at Capgemini, but also with specific organizations, one thing that we are definitely already quite clear about is that healthcare is, when comparing to other public services, one of the most mature areas in attempting to share more data. We have seen that in the pandemic, and I'm sure we will hear about that during the panel. But we see that as well with basically studies and point of views that we report about, where we see that on the one hand, healthcare organizations are investing more and more money into data sharing ecosystems and digital health companies. That also, on the one hand, on the other hand, more and more citizens and people are getting acquainted with the ability and willingness to share their data under certain circumstances. And this is, for example, on the top right, the one number that you see with 73% of US adults who are willing to share the personal data. Once again, as stated by the OECD, by Barbara, I think that here data culture is a very important aspect of the conversation. This number of 73% probably will not be exactly the same in other countries. If you go to the next slide, what we see as well around the world is that more and more organizations, healthcare organizations, are starting to share data and to explore innovative data like AI with the help of data sharing. This is also actually because we have made some progress in digital trust. For example, in a discussion 1 year ago in the AI for Good Summit, we had a welfare agency in Sweden being able to leverage healthcare data because they had installed a data anonymization tool that basically created 95% fake data based on 5% real patient data. And they were able then to treat the patient data within the agency, despite the issues, because they were operationalized and compliant with GDPR, of course. Here you see, for example, that hospitals have collaborated in Spain with Cisco and Vodafone to better identify COVID in the research and development of the country. It was, I think, 3 hospitals in the Basque Catalan area. And with the help of Telco, they were able to share more quickly, more efficiently data, and actually increase by 24%, or 24 points to be exact, the results of, or the identification of COVID. If we go to the next slide, what we want to discuss, as said, and you can go through each of the panelists, is with actors of the field, how this topic of data, how this matter of data sharing and data ecosystem is perceived today by actors of healthcare. And maybe just to start with, because we are 4 different speakers from various horizons and geographies, let's just start with a quick introduction round, also leaning maybe on one of the inspiring stories you have at your organization in the role you have and in regards to data. Scott, I would like to give you the floor first. You are in the middle of the field when it comes to tackling the crisis and the pandemic. Of course, my question would be, who are you? What do you do at Public Health Scotland? And what role has played data in the recent and ongoing pandemic?
Yeah, so hi, Pierre, thanks very much. Hopefully you can all see me and hopefully you can understand my accent. Hello from Scotland. We're on the map after COP26. And I can't let this go without mentioning the football last night. We've all been celebrating a good result for the national team yesterday, which is great for us. So yeah, so I'm a statistician by background, and I am the Director of Data-Driven Innovation, and I'm also the Head of Statistics in Public Health Scotland. So just to say quickly a wee bit about Public Health Scotland. So we are the kind of national agency essentially tasked with improving and protecting the health of the people of Scotland. And I can maybe talk a bit more about that later, Pierre. But one of the great things about Public Health Scotland is that we are also the main national data agency for health and care. So the vast majority of Scotland's health and care data comes into Public Health Scotland. So we're able to kind of analyse, connect, link data from across the health and care system to do some really quite impressive, innovative things with it. As you touched on there, obviously the last year has been a bit of a roller coaster for us with the COVID pandemic. But what it has shown us is the amazing power that data can bring to understanding what's happening with the pandemic, but it's also taught us new ways of working, because there's lots of things we've had to do and adapt to because of the pace of the pandemic that we want to kind of carry on beyond the pandemic into our ways of working. So I'm going to pause there, Pierre, but I'm happy to come back to talk more about kind of what we've learned from COVID. Maybe just to also say, just to give us a sense of the size of the organisation, we're just over 1,000 people, and over 300 of those are statisticians, and there's another 100 who work specifically in kind of managing all the data that comes in from various aspects of health and care. So we're very, very rich on data and the skills to go with it. And maybe just to kind of highlight a particular challenge that we've got, and really interesting to hear what other panelists and the participants think about this, is one of the challenges for us is kind of keeping up with the pace of technology and how all this changes. Because obviously a lot of the kind of underpinning IT systems that support healthcare in the hospitals and the wider community are built at a point in time, and they quickly become out of date, and technology and the pace of change is moving so fast. Kind of how do we keep up? And there was also a skills question for me around our workforce. How do we keep our people up to date with what's happening? So for example, I went to university over 20 years ago. What I was taught and how I was taught is very, very different to how new graduates are taught today. So how do I make sure as a director that I'm harnessing all the great things we could do, but potentially miss because I'm not as au fait with all of the new emerging technologies as I could be. So I'll leave it there just now, Pierre, if that's okay, in terms of introductions, and loads to explore over the course of the hour. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and thanks for also the highlights that you want to tackle in the hour. Thanks. Cyril, you lead as COO the Future for Care.
Not exactly, Pierre. If I may, I'm not the CEO of Future for Care. I'm the CEO of the consulting business line of the Capgemini group, and I represent Capgemini in the board of at the board of Future for Care. Maybe one word on what is Future for Care and why we did that. It's a very recent company. Created in Jan 2021, so less than a year ago, and jointly created by Sanofi, leading life science company, Orange, leading telco company, Generali, the European insurance company, and Capgemini. And the reason we created the four of us, Future for Care, with each 25% of the shares, is to accelerate digital health startups in Europe, or European native digital health startups. And Medvir is a great example of it. Fabien will talk about it. And I will slightly disagree, Pierre, if I may, when you say that healthcare is quite mature on data sharing and so on. I think we are just scraping the surface of the digital transformation and the need or the impact that technology and data will bring to healthcare and well-being. And the reason we joined forces to accelerate those European native startups, and roughly 100 of them, with the first one coming in November right now, is because when we did interview them on what was slowing down their progress and their go-to-market, it was access to data. It's absolutely key for most of them. So that's why. So you will say that Capgemini has no data to share, and that's perfectly right. But we will bring expertise on leveraging data. But Sanofi will bring its set of data on all the medical topics. Orange will bring data on mobility and where are the people, how do they travel, and so on. And Generali will bring all the insurance data regarding insurance health and claims. So this is the promise and the way we plan to support those startups into accelerating their go-to-market, and therefore supporting the well-being and healthcare of the patients and the citizens all over the place.
Merci. Merci. And yes, Fabien, you are one of those startups. Do you want to introduce yourself? You have not been only at that startup, you have also experienced some other sides of the ecosystem. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Just to present myself, I've been working in the various sector of the healthcare system for the past 30 years now. I'm nearly a granny. Just a few words that stuck on my back. First, international. I started my career in data analysis for marketing in Germany, then followed by Japan. And at the end of the journey, I nearly covered all the countries in the world, and I really had to study their healthcare system, would it be in Africa, Middle East, wherever. Second thing is I'm a product-focused person, and I'm fond of high tech. So for me, I really thought at some point, probably 10, 20 years ago, that smart data are knowledge, and knowledge leads to progress. So this is the way, this is the route. And this is why I decided probably end of the, I really started in 2012 working on e-health patient-centric system to understand how data could help patient to have an improved care journey. So this was my mindset. Then in 2016, I met Dr. Loïc Etienne. He's an emergency doctor, and I was totally stoned by his artificial intelligence system. It's an expert solution that works in different direction, different functions, and that aim as to organize prevention, but also triage and also orientation. And probably the star product is what we call now a symptom checker. His expert solution, his research started on Minitel 34 years ago. So it's a long way to produce really smart data. And being totally seduced by the man, because he's a very ethical person, and by his view and by his expert solution, I decided I wanted to work with him. And this is how I started working with him. And I'm now the managing director of Medvia. We decided to join Future for Care. We're very proud to be admitted, to be elected, or to be selected. Why did we choose Future for Care? There are plenty of different platforms now that are available in France. There are 3 big ones, I should say. We decided to go with Future for Care because, first of all, I'm European, and Future for Care for me has a real European vision. Second, it's a private initiative, and we think that innovation is really pushed, especially in terms of data, by private sector. The public sector is in a way responding or trying to adapt to innovation, but the innovation is brought by the private sector at today. So this is why we decided to join. And also the vision of putting in common data is very important to us, but probably I will have time further in this meeting to explain why and how we use data to improve our symptom checker, for example.
Parfait, merci. Yes, to finish the introduction round, indeed, Henry, as Director of Research, you also help another startup, Ada Health, in its operation every day. Could you tell us more about yourself and Ada Health?
Hello. So, as you said, thanks for the introduction. My name is Henry, and I'm actually working with Ada, which is a global digital health company founded in 2011. I myself have a computer engineering background and focus mostly on algorithm development and the whole spectrum from compilers, visualization engines, but also AI and natural language processing and decision support systems. with what now is known as ADA. I started actually 11 years ago, before it actually was ADA. And we back then had a much broader approach of building technology that helps thinking processes and decision-making in complex domains. And for instance, working on semantic search engines and these things. And then, of course, it was to the founders at some point quite obvious that doctors have complex decision tasks in a complex domain. So how about trying to build something that can support doctors with their decision making? And so we basically then started prototyping the thing, and it was then shown to doctors and investors, and it was actually quite a nice success. And then it pretty much became clear that this is the direction the company should go. And my role was basically building the actual reasoning technology, the models, the AIs, and these things, and then building a team around it until then we in 2016 basically launched what is now known as the ADA app. Which is basically also just a symptom assessment solution. Like it's a self-assessment solution that allows everyone with a smartphone to get advice on any symptoms they're worried about, and then we're just like a real doctor. The app asks the user to describe the symptoms and follows up with a series of dynamic questions. Then based on their answers, the ADA creates a report explaining what might be the causing symptoms, along with, which is also important, in suggested next steps. And it could be like stay at home, do nothing, go to pharmacy, see doctor same day, or go to the emergency. And of course, having seen this from like the first ideas to like more than 300 talented people sharing somehow the vision, and this was of course exciting, but I'm actually more excited to see where this all leads. I think we are still at the beginning of the journey. Like this will be a quite interesting century, and I'm really looking forward to see how we all together shape this transition from this one-size-fits-all medicine, treating an average patient, to this truly personalized, evidence and model-driven medicine where diagnosis and prevention and therapy is all done basically on a model for an individual. So, and of course, data ecosystems will play an important role in this, because a lot of data will be needed to build these models and these technologies and make this actually work for everyone. So looking forward to the discussion.
Merci. Merci. And yes, as you have said, the journey is starting. Maybe Scott, to elaborate further on this COVID momentum that you mentioned, what role has data played in terms of maybe also system changing? I mean, in terms of awareness in regards to the potential of data, and you in your role, how do you envision in your strategy the role of data moving forward now, also for a post-COVID world, right, where COVID is not the only issue anymore?
Yeah, thanks very much, Pierre. Now, this is probably a topic I could speak for about 3 hours on, so I'm going to try and condense it down to kind of what we've learned. So I think one of the really interesting things for us is just how quickly we've adapted to dealing with COVID, and how the kind of data ecosystem, as you describe it, has adapted to that. And I was really drawn by some of the opening remarks from Barbara and the opening plenary around kind of trust and responsible access. I think actually the COVID pandemic shone a light on the power of data and how we can use it. And as I said, kind of the very reason for Public Health Scotland is all about improving kind of health and care in Scotland and using data at the heart of that. And what we've got is a real live example of kind of how that can happen with COVID. So I think the first thing to say is that it changed our operation overnight. We're now 365 days a year. We used to be a kind of 5-day-a-week operation. Now we do it all the time. We have data going out into the public domain every day, so it gets published at 2 o'clock. So while I'm online, today's figures will come out. And probably one thing to say, I was at a presentation a couple of weeks ago when COVID started. We actually kept track of the number of cases in Scotland on a whiteboard in an office in Glasgow, because at the start the numbers were quite small, and now we're talking about kind of over the course of the pandemic, kind of hundreds of thousands of cases. So what we've had to do is adapt the technology around how we manage the data around COVID, how we analyse it, and how we do it at pace, so that we can turn around the day's figures as quickly as possible. So we've had to adapt quickly. We've got new systems. We've had to introduce new data collections at pace. And I think we've also recognised that imperfect is good enough. So I come from a world, a statistician world, where I think the gold standard can be something that we always strive for, but it can stop us from doing great things because we strive for perfection. So I think we've learned good enough is good enough in this type of context. And the other thing that's been really great for us that I think prior to the pandemic, if I was to stop somebody in the street and say, do you know about Public Health Scotland? Do you know what we do? I think the majority of them would say, no, not really sure. I can guarantee now that every single person in the country will know who Public Health Scotland are and what we do. I think I scare some of my neighbours because I think they think I'm watching them to see what they're doing about the pandemic, but obviously I'm not doing that. And there's something therefore there about data and data for public good, which has been really, really important over COVID. So we release the data every day in our COVID dashboard. In the old days prior to COVID, if we put out a stats publication, if we got more than 100 hits on it, we were quite excited because that suggested it was getting used by some people. Our COVID dashboard, since it was launched last October, has had 45 million hits. We get tens of thousands of hits every single day. And what that's highlighted is there's a real appetite for data, a real appetite for people to understand what's happening. And we totally recognise that's because COVID is so important to people and for people to understand what's happening in their local areas. And what we're currently reflecting on, kind of what is the future equivalent of that for other public health challenges in the country to try and get people really engaged with data and understanding what's happening in their local patches. The other thing to kind of highlight is we're really big on transparency. So be really clear what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So we do have a lot of data. Within Scotland, we have what's called the Community Health Index number, which is a unique number that each person has. And that allows us to then be able to link all of our data sets together. So we can quickly link the COVID test data to death data, to hospital admission data, to vaccination data, which can then allow us to kind of develop an ecosystem around kind of what's actually happening and what's happening, for example, with people who are vaccinated. Are they or are they not subsequently testing positive? The other big thing for us is all about automation. So we've developed a whole load of automated processes so that things can happen overnight quickly without the need for human intervention. So we've gone a long way from the recording it on the whiteboard to the whole thing being automated every day. And we also release the data in open format. So every day, data goes out as open data so people can pick it up and use it themselves. So we've really broadened our open data ecosystem, covering more than just COVID data, but allowing people to go and use it and present it themselves. And in fact, there's a great example of a student in Glasgow who actually uses our open data to create a public dashboard about what's happening in COVID. And I think I'm allowed to say it, that his dashboard is probably better than ours because he's able to use different technology that's not available to us as a public body. And that's the very reason why we put the open data out there, because if more and more people can use it and get it out there into the public, that's got to be a benefit. And then the other kind of thing just to reflect on is all about partnerships. We've been talking about kind of how do we partner, and I think it's been really important for us that we partner across a range of sectors. So we haven't done it all on our own. I think it would be foolish to think we could do it all on our own. So really important to partner across the public sector. So although Public Health Scotland's a national body, it's really, really important that we've worked with our local health authorities, with our local government authorities, because what's really, really important is although we can kind of present a picture of what we think is happening across the country, there's loads of intelligence locally about what's happening in a particular geographical area. So actually being able to kind of harness the power of us releasing the data and adding to that the local knowledge of what's happening on the ground is absolutely key. But I think what's really important is that we as the national body can turn around the data for others to use rather than every local authority trying to turn it around themselves and duplicating effort. So really important that we get the economies of scale where we can, for recognising the power of what local can bring. Hugely important as well that we've worked with the academic sector. So as I was mentioning, we don't have necessarily all the skills in our organisation. So we bring in and work really closely with universities across Scotland and across wider UK to harness the skills and experience that they've got. and there's lots of shared learning across Europe and the UK about particular approaches and techniques that we find. And we've also partnered with the private sector. So we have done quite a bit of work with Capgemini, for example, in helping us build at pace information systems around how we manage and collect data around different aspects of the pandemic. I was given the task back in the early days of the pandemic of setting up contact tracing in Scotland from scratch. So we didn't have an infrastructure to do contact tracing. So we had to one, bring in the workforce to do it, but also bring in the underlying IT to actually help us record what was happening and have that intelligence quickly from what we were hearing from the contact tracers. So I would say that it's been quite incredible. I think I would say I'm really inspired and proud to have been a part of it. And we are really, really determined that all of the learning I've just talked about how we've worked at pace, how we've been innovative, how we've automated, how we've been transparent. It's really, really important that we build on that as we go forward to tackle other public health challenges.
Just want to add on a question to this. All these activities, was it possible in a seamless activity flow, or did it need also a policy regulation shift and a political discussion, basically?
Yeah, so less of a political decision. I think that there was a real will for data to be used and data to be used quickly. So that was a given. But we do, as you'd understand, it's health service data, so it's data about people, and it goes down to quite granular level. We need to make sure that we've got really good processes in place that allow us to share data quickly and effectively, but do it safely and securely so people can trust that we're looking after their data. And if I just reflect on it, sometimes if we were introducing a new data collection or a new data flow or a new data linkage, the approvals process that we had to go through could take months, if not years, to kind of get agreement across the country. One thing that COVID has certainly brought to the fore is that we've been able to get things agreed in a matter of kind of hours or days. So there's been a real willingness to move at pace on all of this. And so I think one of the lessons learned is if we've been able to do that in COVID, we need to be able to kind of build on those fast decision-making fora in the future. So I would say it's opened our eyes that we can do things quickly if we strive to do it. Even if I just think about some of the technology about how we've all worked from home, we've been entirely home working for the last 18 months. The technology to do that was rolled out across Scotland in less than 2 days to the entire health service. I think in the pre-pandemic world, that would have taken about 5 years with lots of wrangling about who was going first, was it the right software to use, all of that kind of stuff. But it had to be done because of the situation we were in, and it was done quickly. So really, really important, Pierre, that we don't go back to the way things were. Mm-hmm. And I guess part of my role in Public Health Scotland is just to make sure that we really learn from the good things about the pandemic and build on that for ways of working. One of the great things for me being that I can join things like this from Edinburgh without the need to travel, and I no longer have a 3-hour round trip commute each day because I can work entirely from home, which is fantastic. So thanks, Pierre.
Merci beaucoup. And yes, anyone, I want to make this quite open. So any reaction to that instinctively from you, Cyril, Fabien, or Henry?
Maybe one reaction to build on what Scott mentioned is the key point. One of the two key points which are fundamental. One is proper management of data sharing. We have, as soon as we introduced Future for Care in the media, we had plenty of questions regarding regulation, data privacy. How are we going to protect the fact that this data sharing doesn't become a kind of big mess and data leakage all over the place? So we, of course, Future for Care will not host any data. It will create a data catalog or data catalogs for startups to see what data is available, because startups are not only lacking data, but they don't even know what data can be accessed, even for open data. So we will introduce the data catalog from data from Sanofi, Generali, Orange, and other partners, by the way. and then it will be one-to-one connections between the data owners and the relevant startups. So it's we are not going to create a mess, and we are going to, of course, protect all data privacy and comply with regulation. And the other key point I will stress in what Scott mentioned, so Scott comes from the public sector, and with Future for Care, it's the opposite. We come from the private, and we will share data of those private companies. But of course, it's absolutely key that we combine public and private efforts to accelerate innovation in digital health. So Future for Care will not be an initiative behind closed doors for industrial players, but we are going to partner with hospital, research institution, patient association, public organization. So in France, there is something called the Health Data Hub, and other at the European level, and NHS Scotland potentially. Happy to discuss it offline. We all know it's not easy. Sometimes you have some cultural issues or topics to handle, because those public and private don't always had successful stories previously. But it's really key that we make this connection, and it will help accelerate the digital health in France, in Europe, and worldwide. So really happy to see this public-private synergy coming to life.
Thanks. And from a startup point of view, Fabien and Henry, how is today your belief in the cooperation with public services, and what is the reality of it? Do you have any experiences to share here in this field?
Yes, in fact, I was listening to Scott, and to us as a startup, we felt when the COVID pandemic started already in China, because I'm very connected with Asia, that the war was beginning. And when you have a war, some operations are suddenly stopped and some new begin. This was the feeling we had. As a startup as well, plenty of our projects have been totally stopped because everybody was focused on the COVID. So what we did already was to, of course, enlarge our catalog with a new disease, COVID. How we did it? Open source data. I call the CDC in China. I got the first data to understand the symptoms, and then we online put the COVID diagnosis so that people could assess if their symptoms were corresponding or not. And then we had two different actions. The first one was to organize a kind of aperitif, cafe meeting with emergency doctors at some points in the month to understand what they were, what were their problems, and how they were reacting to this overflow of COVID ill people. And that was very interesting to see how human organization in emergency services in France were reacting, reorganizing, and so on. So all the projects that had been stopped, in fact, restarted from that very moment a different way. How do we, in the future, reorganize care access to make sure that first, we don't get a second pandemic. Second, if we have a crisis like this again, we can be organized and have a better patient flow, okay? And the second thing we worked on, in our business model, we decided to have the expert solution being paid by our customers, because we want to monetize the expert solution and not to monetize the data. In a business model, sometimes you have to make a choice, and this is our choice. But during the crisis, we decided that it was urgent to have our solution on air, open access on our website, because we understood after a few months listening to emergency doctors that people were so obsessed by the COVID crisis that they totally forgot that they had thoracic pain, that they had diabetes, that their surgery that should have happened a month ago should be at least monitored. Well, their health should be monitored. So we put on the front line, okay, if you don't have COVID, what else could you have? Because we wanted to put emphasis on the fact that it's not only COVID that you risk, but your health might be at risk and you should assess it. But the noise of the COVID was so high that it was very difficult to be heard. This is what we've learned during this COVID. To highlight on the open data, for us, it was very important, and I would like to thank the NHS, because the first data we got on the COVID open data was coming from the CDC China. The second update we got was coming from the World Health Organization. And then we got a very interesting study, very deep, very interesting to update our COVID diagnosis made by the NHS, where you had new symptoms and also the prevalence of each symptoms. And that was very interesting for us. So yes, open source data during the COVID was very helpful.
Great, merci. Henry, any additions there?
First, I can only second this. Of course, during the pandemic, the other diseases must not be ignored. They're actually also quite important, especially if everyone is going through some symptom checking if it's COVID. If it's not COVID, that's also a really important part of the question, because the other diseases are not gone away. They're still there. They're still dangerous, and you need to act on them even in COVID times. And so that not only detecting COVID, but if it's not COVID, looking for the other ones is an important thing that from some systems was also here and there a little bit underestimated, and it's important. So happy to hear that. And you asked somehow how the cooperation with public services works, and here and somehow I think an important part, for instance, is cooperation with public health services, especially the ones responsible, like in Germany, RKI and so on, and the organizations responsible for monitoring health on a society level, and here, actually, I think symptom assessment systems can really contribute. I think we just 2 weeks ago, something we published a paper where it nicely somehow shows the curve of influenza, and that we can also see these curves in our data, and that we actually see that a little bit earlier than in the public data. So that pretty much underlines that these symptoms can contribute to public health data and contribute to public surveillance and outbreak detection and these systems, and thereby contributing to society and informing society and politics to act on these things earlier, inform the way forward there. Yeah, and so knowing this and coming first evidence out there, of course, we see that public service approach us and health systems approach us and asking for cooperations and how we can integrate these things to actually leverage the information and the knowledge available there. Yeah.
Well, one other point I would like to address, and thanks all for making a great case of how the data actually of public sector can be used by startups and vice versa, is the role of the citizen and the citizen data. In some cases, actually, Henry, I guess with the ADA app, it's actually very close to the citizen, even in its pocket. And with the rise of wearables, for example, as well, we are getting more and more close to the citizens' data. Plus, what we have had as discussions with various healthcare organizations in the past 2 years, actually, is the understanding that the patient care doesn't start when one enters the hospital. It starts wherever the symptom starts, basically, but also at home, of course. And here my question, actually, maybe starting with Henry, is how important is citizen data here, but also how important is it to steer more incentives to bring the citizen awareness and willingness to share data in a safe way. Could you elaborate on that topic of citizen engagement in the data topic?
Well, first, you're absolutely right. Health systems don't start in the emergency room; they start at home. And so it's also interesting to see that to some degree, health systems had somehow a little bit of a blind spot, because for them, the health journey starts with the doctor. But now we have all the technology and the apps and all these things that allow you to see that it actually starts earlier. And so this data, of course, is quite important for understanding users' health. And nowadays with symptom checking, of course, they can just use apps and whenever they have a symptom they're worried about. But I think the future in general, it's moving more from the sick care to healthcare. And so it's more from helping you once it's already too late to help users to stay healthy in the first place. And of course, this will require more data. First, for the different models and eyes to understand the user's health and how it might develop in the future, but at the same time also for building models and in general growing mankind's medical knowledge. Because even if we know now quite a lot, I think that the larger part we still don't know, and it's all the data together that will allow society to learn more about health and add the missing pieces to the puzzle. So having the data and convincing users to share it is somehow key. But I think it will be not that much of a problem. I think in general, users are quite known to the concept that they need to share data in order to have better health outcomes. And so if you go to the doctor, and the doctor asks, where does it hurt? And you say, oh, I don't tell you. Then you can only get a really high level, pretty generic, oh, maybe come next week back and drink a lot, whatever. And if you tell them the details, you get, of course, a much more customized answer. And so people know that they need to share data in order to enable the others to help them. And of course, with sharing data for building models, it's a bit more indirect, but I think also some of the studies presented in the beginning pretty much show that in general, people are willing to contribute the data if they don't feel that it can somehow come back to them in a bad way or something. Mm-hmm. So if they're actually willing to contribute to growing a knowledge there. We just somehow need to make sure that we have the data ecosystems and the regulatory and frameworks and the technology frameworks in place so that users can easily share this data if they feel comfortable with it and have the full transparency and can always pull the plug if they don't feel good anymore. And just enabling this, then I think users will share data, especially if we then make transparent how the shared data helps them later somehow staying healthy and so that they profit also from sharing.
Merci beaucoup. We have only 3 or 4 minutes left. Any complementary views on this question of the citizen data, citizen engagement?
Just one word that is very fashionable. I think that patients should consider themselves as kind of a whistleblower. Because when they declare their symptoms on a symptom checker or on any system, there can be an alert to a new cluster. And I think that if everybody in Europe would use the same ontologies, the same way to express their symptoms, we would not have a second pandemic, because we would be warned instantly of new clusters, new symptoms arising suddenly in one single area or territory. So for me, the future of data, people should feel that they are responsible also when they share their data. It's part of their citizen responsibility.
Maybe just 2 comments on my side. I fully agree with what Henry and Fabien have been saying. So first comment, people should not wait to have symptoms or to be sick before sharing data. People in good health who think that everything goes fine should be sharing data, because those data are absolutely key to prevent and to avoid getting sick. And I think this will be more of a challenge, because people, as Henry was saying, are happy to share data when they go and see their HCP because they are sick and so on. But when everything goes well, you have less tendency to share data. And the second part, what is going to be tricky is to have a kind of single regulation across all countries. There will be, I mean, the habits and the way of sharing data in China, in US, in France, before we kind of agree on something common and sharing it at global level, because the pandemic showed that it's not a Scottish problem or a French problem, it's absolutely worldwide. This is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Many thanks. Yeah. Scott, I see you on mute.
No, yeah, no, I agree with everything everybody's been saying. I mean, particularly the kind of health starting long before it gets to hospital, and that's one of the challenges we're certainly thinking through, because actually the really good data we've got is actually all the data from hospitals, and it's the other sectors that are less good. So kind of how do we tackle that? And the only kind of, I guess, additional point I would make around the kind of issue of wearables and citizens supporting their data is the whole challenge around digital exclusion. So people who don't have access to tools to do all of that, kind of how do we make sure that they are included? And often that can be people from some of the more deprived areas, which often have poorer health. So it's just something about, it's often the willing well who do these things rather than some of the citizens that we're trying to tackle. So really just thoughtful about that point and how we just don't make sure that we're inadvertently missing people when we go down this route. So thank you.
I see. Yes, I think this danger of healthcare elite, so to say, is definitely something to take care of. Thanks a lot for all the various views on this topic. Now for the final 3 minutes of the session on health, we would just like to give also the floor to two colleagues from the Innovation Hub. Often organizations ask us how to start or what to start with, not in terms of really having the one use case, but more like to enhance the data culture, to get into this innovation spirit. And we have two colleagues from the Innovation Lab in Germany who have built something for us. John, you have the floor.
Hi, yeah, thanks Pierre for the slot. Oh, I see my video is not that fine. Okay, so yeah, Pierre already stated it. I'm the leader of the Public Sector Innovation Lab team in Germany from Capgemini, and I'm here to present you one of our ideas on how we can approach a certain case on a health issue. I hope you can all see my screen now. So, wait. Technical issues. So now let's begin. So around 17.9 million people die yearly from cardiovascular diseases. So this is a number from 2019. Well, also this is a sad fact, and we thought about how we can tackle this issue. And we used certain techniques or innovative techniques on design thinking and also making expert interviews with our domain experts at Capgemini, and also creating mock-ups, which I want to present to you later, on an idea of an healthcare or home care app that will probably or has the ability to reduce the occurrence of cardiovascular diseases for citizens. And we are approaching this not as a fitness tracker app, but as the usage from publicly available data. And we are using the approach of federated learning here to generate valid data and valid data models for that. And I will now hand over to my colleague Yuri, who will tell us on how this will technically work. Yuri, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, I'm Yuri, and I'm going to guide you through some technical aspects. What have we done, and why exactly have we decided for the technologies that we use? Okay, as we know, data is sensitive, valuable, and sometimes quite difficult to transmit. So, for example, hospital data, and therefore we came across solution, privacy preserving machine learning, which in this case is federated learning. What is federated learning? In this case, to understand federated learning, we probably have to start with traditional learning. So in comparison to traditional learning, which requires main computer or so-called data center where we keep all the data and only then train our model. Federated learning needs like a lot of different computers. So for example, I will explain how it works on the example of our system. So here we see 3 different boxes. These boxes are basically hospital systems, and in each hospital has its own patients. Each of the patients have their devices, for example, that might be some phones, smartwatches, anything. And also we have medical equipment in the hospitals. We collect this data only in our hospital system. And how it works, instead of sending the data to the main computer, we train the model locally. So it means that we keep our data only in the hospital systems. And only we train the model, then the model will be sent to the central node. Central node or central computer is the place where we receive all the models, or in this case, not models, but models weights. We take the average of them and set the weights for the new created model. And then this model will be sent to all other computer or nodes which are in the system. So from that, even the computers or systems, hospital systems, which hasn't had the data about different or other patients, they will benefit from this data. So we keep the data locally, but we can exchange the models in this case. And only then we distribute back this model. This model can be distributed even for the hospitals that haven't participated in this training round. And only then we have our model and we can benefit from this data. Yeah, that's it roughly.
Okay, thanks. And let's have a quick shot on how this could look like. So basically, we are sharing the app part here. So basically nothing where the learning especially is be done, but for the citizen's perspective. So basically, the user logs in, he inserts his data that is not assessed by the way from smartwatches, but could not be measured. And then he gets his little gamification reward on basically for inserting his data into the app. As I said, data could also come from smartwatches or something like other assets where we have the opportunity to get health data from. And the app then also has we called it intelligent health dashboard. So basically that what we called recommendation data earlier is compared here to the user's local data and weighted so that we get a little bit of a deviation here on normal data so that we can see, is our citizen at risk for getting a cardiovascular disease or is he not? And as we can see here, most of the parameters are green, one cholesterol is red, which is based on the data from the central model. And so that here he should maybe visit a doctor. And also such a home care app could do different assets. It could also suggest you on healthy food or something like that. Also, you could make a doctor's appointment here. So there are many possibilities and we have the chance to make it happen by sharing our data. And this is all I want to report here, and we'll hand over back to Pierre.
Merci beaucoup, and thanks for the approach. Yes, we just wanted to kind of open the toolbox. I see that the numbers are rising again. So this means that the other streams are back. Miriam, if you're there already, let's...
Yes, I am.
Yeah. All right. I see also the ITU saying 20 seconds until everything closes. I hope you mean the breakout rooms. Yes, okay. All right, perfect. We are back to nearly the 100 participants we had in the plenary. So let's maybe start, Miriam, if you could just start sharing the slides for the concluding remarks.
Yeah.
Just to make sure also a test, are all the moderators back? Maël, Gianfranco,
Yes.
Solène, perfect. Maybe just to start with, thanks a lot for the rich conversations. I hope and guess the conversations were just as rich in the other streams. Really, thanks a lot to our external speakers, actually, because you made the flesh of the conversation today. What maybe I would just try to ask as a voiceover to the moderators that are that have some things to share. Any highlights from the conversation we just had in the parallel streams that you would like to share?
Yeah, I can start if you like. So from decent work and economic growth, it immediately highlighted, let's say, the dichotomy between the efficient and fair use of technology with so much work we still have to do on the human side of things. We may have the perfect data and the perfect data sharing and the perfect algorithm to run on top of them. But if we cannot make our colleagues, our workers feeling comfortable that these algorithms and data are used in their interest, they will retain information, they will feel threatened, they will not possibly collaborate to this perfect picture of employment we have in mind. So the invitation for all of us is not to think, as much as we work in a technology company, right? Not to think that technology is the solution to all evil, but always to consider those elements of education, literacy, communication. And there's a word that was used often, narrative, being able to tell the story of what we're doing and why for all of our colleagues and involved to feeling part of this.
Many thanks. Any other insights to be shared? From the healthcare stream, for sure, we also witnessed that in the past years, obviously, with the COVID pandemic, there has been really like also a system change. We had the chance to have very different sides, an ecosystem orchestrator with Future for Care, startups as ecosystem user as well, and Public Health Scotland, who shared actually that basically there are ways to deal with data, also actually with the citizen engagement and citizen data that will be on the rise, because also the matter is not really just a question of luxury good, but also a question of responsibility and duty in the society that could emerge as also the involvement of citizens within data ecosystems. And that obviously more is needed. We are at the start, and definitely in order to leverage the intelligent technologies that are already showing their potential, we will need that data orchestrated and orchestrated well, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of privacy and trust as well. Many thanks again for having joined. If you go to the next slide, now, of course, the question is, what can we do with that? And when building the concluding remarks, actually, of this session, I've thought about the session of last year, where we were tackling the use of AI, specifically a very use case orientation, towards specific SDGs and specific fields. And if you go to the next slide, indeed, this map of projects and experiences we shared last year, I feel like we have been a bit anti-chronological about this. It was a great session last year, but data sharing in data ecosystems will enhance actually most of those use cases and projects we have, or that other guest speakers had, of course, from help in jurisdictional decisions, but also fire risk assessment with geosatellite intelligence, the help in detecting early dropout at schools, or the bed availability monitoring in hospitals. These are all cases where enabling to share more data and therefore to create more insights from a more complete view and in a more rapid process is what is going to really nurture the Datenspielplatz in German, the data play field that organizations can invest with intelligent technologies. For each of these cases, the federation of data on the one hand, but also the federation of actors will be of foremost importance. If we go to the next slide, I just want really to you need to click a few times, I guess. No, yeah. Thank you very much for having joined in an ecosystem of speakers. We had a very a nice discussion for the 2 hours. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Feel free to paste any questions in the chat that we might still want to answer in the coming weeks. And reach out to you. On the last slide that I have, really the ecosystem part, what we want to do with this effort, with this momentum, is really not just an event, obviously, but really to steer the discussion and to continue the discussion. Last year, after the sessions that we had, we published and wrote, based on the reflections we had with all the participants, 6 points of views around AI for health, around AI for environment, and so on and so forth. There were 6 fields, not all at the same maturity side. As said, for example, on the information play field, where we tackled disinformation and fake news detection, it was not at all the same catalog of ideas, of inspiration, and of best practice that we have in the smart territories and healthcare field already. We are not that far in healthcare and smart territories, but there are already a lot of structured initiatives also within the organizations. And here also congrats and many thanks for driving this at the AI for Good Summit and the ITU, where there are task forces meeting every now and then about topics like mobility, like health. What we want to do, and what can be our role at Capgemini in this field, of course, is to provide some thought leadership and intelligence. And I really encourage you indeed to read the data sharing masters point of view by the Capgemini Research Institute, as well as the Technovision public sector report that we published sooner this year, with a chapter about data apart together, but also about what we call crazy data train around big data, or good times around the AI for good stream. I can send the link as well here. That will provide you with use cases and technology explanations on a rather high level that help you to understand what you can do from the processes you have today. So moving from RPA to IPA, moving from dashboards to intelligent analytics, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the exit of this metro station we can call AI for Good, there are plenty of follow-ups between yourself, with us, or with other ecosystems that we can nurture by using the knowledge we have gathered here, and simply apply it to discussions around sustainability reports that are published here and there, about use case exchanges and how these are built, what technology they leverage, what accelerator they have, about international workshops, so bringing the different geographies together. Because on health, what the APHP does today in France, maybe the Bundesministerium für Gesundheit has done it in Germany yesterday, and maybe the Ministry of Health in Sweden will do it tomorrow. And this is a multiplier effect that we need to activate in regards to address a global challenge on a global level. And of course, starting the joyful road of proof of concepts. We know that this road is not always successful. A proof of concept, what we call the dev valley sometimes, when the data is missing or when the scalability is not possible. But it is the attempt to deal with that topic for the first time, to try thinking innovatively, and to try assessing first, what do we want to do with data? And I had a call just today morning with a welfare agency in Europe, where the question for minutes was, what do we actually want to do with AI? We have some playground, we have some play field and some investment coming, but what do we do? Because the answer, let's do AI in order to do AI, or because AI is cool, or because we are asked to do AI, is definitely not the way. So these are all food for thought follow-ups that I give you on your road today. Feel free to reach out to me, to us. We will always have a year to listen to your questions